Hey, Shalom, Shalom, Mishpachah. Welcome to another edition of Ray Bash's Ramblings. I'm your host, Rabbi Yehuda ben Shomer, and today I'm going to be talking about what the Torah says about premarital sex. Okay, ready? Here we go. This is what the Torah says about premarital sex. Did you get that? Did you hear it? Well, Rabbi, I didn't hear anything. Exactly. The Torah is silent on the issue of premarital sex. I could hear you gasping out there, you evangelical Christians and a lot of people. They're like, but, what do we tell our teenagers? They're going to be having sex like crazy, and how do you tell them that you should be abstinent until marriage if the Torah doesn't say anything about premarital sex? Hold it. Put the brakes on. Just one moment. I'll tell you why the Torah doesn't say anything about premarital sex. Because it was a non-issue back in the day of the Torah. For the simple fact that once a child became pubescent, where they were able to father and mother children, once their hormones started to flare up and bloom and start raging, they were married off. They were married off right pretty much after puberty. The society was different back then. It wasn't children marrying children. Because of the Middle Eastern culture and because of the desert nomadic life, children were forced to grow up quicker than they do today. And so there was no awkward transition of adolescence. You just went from childhood to adulthood. You were a child, you were bar bat mitzvahed. Well, they didn't have bat mitzvahs back then, but they had a rite of passage, and boom, you were an adult. And you were, married off, and you were an adult in the society. And so it was pretty much a non-issue. But there is a passage in Deuteronomy which talks about a husband who marries a wife who suspects that she's not a virgin, and the father has to come to the daughter's defense and present the marital bedsheet or the marital gown that the marriage was consummated in, because there should be blood on that sheet or gown because of the broken hymen, which would indicate that the virginity had been broken. So that flow of blood was the blood covenant of marriage back then. So there was no rings to symbolize marriage or to seal the contract. There was no really signing of papers until later on, and so the act of sex itself was considered marriage. It was sealing the deal. And so by this passage, which a man would suspect that maybe his wife isn't a virgin, or accusing her of not being a virgin before they were married, alludes to and indicates that premarital sex was looked down upon, that somebody who was not a virgin when they were married was considered damaged goods or used goods, and they were not meritable material. And so either the woman had to continue living in her father's house and just become an old maid, or just wait for somebody to have mercy on her and take her in. So the indication in the Torah is that the allusion to it is that premarital sex is wrong, that it is looked down upon, that it is forbidden by Torah, by this passage that alludes to, that a bride should be a virgin when they get married. Now, fast forward to the Brit, the New Testament. It was written in a different time era and a different culture. You were still dealing with Jews and Hebrews, and the writers of the Brit were Jewish, so they were drawing from their knowledge of Torah and applying Torah to the Western culture which they found themselves in, because Rome, the Western culture, was ruling over Israel at that time. So the society had changed, and you still had bar and bat mitzvahs, you still had that rite of passage, but people didn't necessarily marry off in the Jewish world at that time as soon as they hit puberty. They were married off later, in their late teens, early 20s, sort of like it is today. So that was kind of the beginning of that awkward phase between childhood and adulthood that we call adolescence. And so therefore abstinence was preached and promoted by the writers of the Brit Chadasha, because when you read the word fornication, it implies sexual relation between two non-married people, whereas the word adultery implies sexual relations between two married people, which is not his or her spouse. So fornication alludes to the fact that premarital sex is forbidden, that it is wrong, because the Brit Chadasha speaks much about sexual immorality and fornication, whereas the Torah is silent. But yet we know the writers of the Brit Chadasha are drawing from their knowledge of Torah and applying what the Torah said in the sections and verses that I quoted or referenced to that particular time and era. So the Torah is applicable and to our everyday life and time. It just wasn't back then. Though culture changes, we can take the historical and contextual facts and the Torah itself and still draw modern day application, though the time and cultures have changed. The Torah does not change. So that is the Torah and biblical standpoint, and then that's our review of premarital sex. That it is forbidden, that it is wrong, that it is best to wait until someone is married. So I wanted to tackle that issue with you today. Thank you for watching. Hope you enjoyed it. Hope that it was enlightening. And before I go, a lot of people may still be hung up on the fact that way back in the Middle East, back in the time that the Torah and the Tanakh was written, that people were married off as soon as they hit puberty. But you have to remember that the society was totally different back then. Like I said, they were forced to grow up quicker. And really, if you think about it, our grandparents and great-grandparents and great-great-grandparents, most of them, if you do your homework, will realize they were married off when they were teenagers, either when they were 12, 13, 14, and so on. I know that my grandmother was married when she was 13. So they were much more mature back then, but it would be utterly irresponsible and utterly foolish in this day and time and age for teenagers to marry 13-year-olds, 14-year-olds, because they just couldn't handle it. The culture and the society has not produced mature teenagers, and they are not equipped. They are ill-equipped to handle the responsibility of marriage and adulthood and parenthood, because the covenant, the act of sex, the giving of one's virginity, is considered a great gift. It's considered a holy act. It's considered a covenantal relationship. So it's not to be entered to lightly, or not to be entered to just to satisfy one's raging hormones. So unfortunately, in this day of age, because of the teenagers and adolescents that this society produces, they're ill-equipped to marry once their hormones kick in, and therefore have to practice restraint and abstinence until they get married. So thanks for watching. Shalom and Shavuot Tov. Bye-bye.